Hello, and welcome to Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folktales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, and I'm coming at you live from PepperWorld Headquarters. I am feeling so frustrated right now. Why is that? Why am I frustrated? I'm frustrated because I'm very disappointed that grown adults here on planet Earth condone war. When has war been chill? War is not chill. War is not okay. And I feel really frustrated. How can we tell children not to hit each other over blocks and markers and Barbie dolls, and yet we can condone grown adults to use automatic weapons and poison to kill people? I'm really sad. I'm really sad about it. I feel that as human beings, we are missing out on a huge opportunity to enjoy this planet to the fullest capacity. This planet is so beautiful, and it is a paradise. We have access to food that grows on trees. We have access to fresh water that rains out of the sky. We have everything we need and extra to spare. We could be living in vast gardens that don't require farming. We could be picking our food and enjoying the beauty of this planet. I don't know if you can hear the birds that are singing outside my window, but the birds get it. They're just vibing right now. We could all be vibing. And I don't believe that humans are inherently destructive. I think that is an aspect inside every living creature's psyche. But I personally believe that humans are natural caretakers. Humans are lovers. Humans are artists. Humans are inherently creative. And I think we've been using our creative skills for exploitation, destruction, and control. But throughout history and throughout some of the darkest times in human history, there have been humans that have dedicated their lives to the arts, to nature, to animals and children. There have been so many beautiful human beings that have lived lives on this planet, and regardless of the amount of horror that was happening, they still chose to create. And I'm really inspired by those human beings. I want to be one of those human beings. I want to use my life to create things of beauty, but also to create spaces where plants, animals, humans can grow. Growing is amazing. And it doesn't really take too much work. With a little bit of water, a little bit of sun, and the right nutrients, all living things can grow at peace. And that's my prayer. That's my prayer for not only humanity, but for this planet. It's such a beautiful place. And if I could have it, if you walk away with anything today, I hope you walk away with the reminder that you live on one of the most beautiful planets of all time. It's sick here, dude. It's fucking sick. All right. Well, today we're going to hear two little stories, and they're both called The Magic Ring. One of the stories is an Armenian folktale, and the other one is English. It's British, mate. It's British, love. I promise I won't read it in an English accent, but I could. Write in if that's what you want. If that's what you want from me. First order of business. You're fantastic. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Thank you for coming to planet Earth. Let's have some story time. Shall we? Yes. Okay, so here is the story of the magic ring. And this particular story is from Armenia. Okay, here we go. Long ago, there was an old woman who had a son. She always advised him not to cause injury to any man and not to torture or kill any animal or beast, no matter how despised it might be. They were very poor. The lad went to the forest every day and brought a bundle of wood on his back. He sold it for 2 pence and bought bread for his aged mother and himself. One day, he saw that the village boys were torturing a kitten and taking pleasure in its cries. Ooh, that's some dark shit. That is some dark shit. Why do you torture the poor animal? Said the lad to the boys. Let it go. Give us your pennies, and we will let it go, said the boys. He at once gave them the 2 pence which he had earned that day by selling his wood, and took the kitten home with him. See, we love this baby boy. This is a good boy. Take notes, people. It doesn't matter about how poor you are or how rich you are. We can all show up and be nice to the kittens and be nice to the babies and be nice to the peppers and be nice to the plants. Is that so hard to ask? Okay, come on. Both the young lad and his mother went to bed hungry that night. On the following day, he took the kitten with him to the forest, and that evening the bundle of wood was sold at 4 pence. He had paid 2 pence for bread, and putting the other 2 pence in his pocket, he returned home. On his way, when he met the village boys, who were this time torturing a mouse. Yeah, see, you hear that? The peppers are not having it. The peppers are not having it. The lad gave his 2 pence to the boys and took the mouse home with him. On the 3rd day, he saved a whelp of a dog and brought it home. On the 4th day, he saved a little snake from the boys, and he put it in a jug and kept it at home. Peppers. It wouldn't be esoterica and nonsense without the Peppers cameo. I still don't know their names. They're like my neighbor on our backyard share a wall, so I don't really know who they are, but I know they're Peppers. They're medium round boys. They're medium short-legged round boys, if that helps you paint a picture of what they look like. Okay, so let's take a toll here. Our little angel boy, baby boy, has saved a kitten, a mouse, a snake, and a dog so far, right? I just feel this is just so dark. Okay, now we're at the mouse, right? So now the boys are torturing a mouse. No, sorry. He saved the mouse, he saved the snake, he saved the dog. Okay, on the following day, he took all the animals and he went to the forest to cut wood. At noon, he sat at a fountain to eat his lunch and gave a share of it to each animal. Oh, this is such a nice boy. He took the snake out of the jug and he let it go, but the reptile would not leave him. He then gave it a piece of bread. As soon as it bit into the bread, it changed into a pretty boy. Ooh, we love pretty boys. And the pretty boy said to the young lad, I am the son of the king of India. Magicians stole me and changed me into a snake. The enchantment was such that the moment a human being gave me bread to eat with his own hand, oh, the Peppers are pissed. The Peppers are pissed. Okay, Peppers, could you guys relax? No. Come on, Peppers. Well, you know what? When the Peppers bark, it's time to drink water, everyone. Okay. So these magicians turned him into a snake. And at the moment a human being gave me bread to eat with his own hand, I should again change back into a boy. I escaped from the hands of the magicians and came to the village for the purpose of biting a piece of bread from a human hand. But the village urchins found me and were about to kill me when you saved me. I owe you my life and my freedom from the magician's spell. Now let me advise you. When I go home to my father, he will be so happy to see me that he will wish to reward you with the most precious things in his kingdom. But when he asks you to demand something from him, be careful and request only the ring which he has on his finger. It is a magic ring. And the moment you turn its jewel upside down, 2 genii will wait on you. Come on, Pepper. The story's getting good. These bitches. Okay. Peppers. Okay, Peppers. Thank you. We love the Peppers. I would never disrespect the Peppers. Okay. So, where are we? Okay, our prince, who is from India, is telling him that the magic ring on his father's finger is what our young lad should request. He says it is a magic ring, and at the moment you turn its jewel upside down, 2 genii will wait on you to do your will and will bring for you anything that you may desire. The lad accompanied the boy to the court of the king of India, who was so glad at the sight of his child that he was almost beside himself with joy. The boy told his father all that had happened and presented the lad as the deliverer of his life. "Ask of me what you will," said the king to the lad. "You have saved the heir apparent, and I will give you whatever you demand, even half of my own kingdom." Gag. "Long live the king," said the lad. "I desire only the ring on your fingy." "A plague upon him who advised you," said the king. "You have demanded the costliest thing I have. But as I have promised, I must give it to you." Wow, this was back in the day when people stayed true to their word. I respect that. So, saying, he gave the ring to the lad and ordered his saddlebags to be filled with gold. The lad came back to his aged mother and told her what had happened. "Well then, son," said the old woman, "let me go and ask our king to give you his daughter in marriage." The lad consented, and the old woman, after buying for herself a new dress and adorning herself as best as she could, went to the court of the king. "What do you want?" said the king. "Long live the king," said the old woman. "I have come to ask you by God's order to give your daughter in marriage to my son." "Good," said the king. "But as your son, the equivalent of the dower that I give to my daughter." But has your son the equivalent of the dower that I can give to my daughter? Pardon me. "Certainly he has," answered the woman. "How much do you want him to have?" He must have a treasure full of gold like mine, and a magnificent palace like mine. The road between my palace and his must be covered with a single soft rug. On both sides shady trees must grow, and under them horsemen ride from one end to the other, on horses all milky white. If he can procure these, I will give him my daughter in marriage. If not, I will not. My mind is still lingering on the milky white horses. And I don't know why, but my brain just assumed that these trees were fig trees. And so now I'm imagining milky white horses eating figs directly off the tree. And it's a very nice picture. Okay, so the old woman returned home, and she told her son what the king had said. The lad turned the jewel of the ring, and behold, 2 genii presented themselves with their hands folded upon their breasts. And they said, "Tell us your will, and we will do it immediately." The lad ordered them to prepare all that the king had demanded. Everything was ready in one night. On the following day, the king was greatly pleased with the palace and everything in it, and he gave his daughter in marriage. There they lived in happiness until the death of the old woman. But there was a Jewish man who had heard of the magic ring, and he was anxious to get it. This is feeling a little bit coded and a little bit prejudiced. But alas, the story continues. He took on the shape of a peddler and came to the palace at a time when the lad had gone hunting, and there was no one there besides the princess. She opened the door to look at the goods of the peddler. "I peddle nice goods for ladies," said the clever Jewish man, "and in order to give ladies facility, I do not care to sell them for money, but I exchange my goods for old jewelry, such as rings and the like. Any lady will have some old rings which she can give in return for beautiful goods. Am I right?" Oh my God, this is so fucked up. This is why I do love hearing old stories, though, because it really paints a picture of the cultural beliefs of such a place, right? Obviously, like in Armenia, they were the first country to become a Christian nation. So I'm sure that there is a lot of coded stories that throw shade and racist stereotypes at Jewish people. And I'm noticing that like a lot of stories will have a culture or like a group of people that they scapegoat as being evil or brutish or, you know, miserly, and then other cultures which they like associate with magic and splendor, right? Obviously in this story, they are projecting this history of like genie onto India, but a lot of these stories come from the Persian world, right? So it's interesting hearing like the perspective of these stories from this part of the world, hearing the things that they admire as foreign and exotic and exciting, and the things that they deem as like swindlers. It's very telling. Okay, so the princess replies, "Let me see if we have any rings at home which I can give you for your goods." The princess went back inside, and she came back with the magic ring. She said, "Here, I have found this among my husband's things. I think it will do for you." The man gave some rubbish in exchange for the precious ring. As soon as he put it on its finger, he turned the jewel, and behold, the 2 genies stood before him, ready to do his commands. "I wish you to take this palace with me in it and carry it to the island of the 7 seas, and I wish you to throw the former owner into the unfathomable sea." He had hardly finished his words when the palace, with the princess in it, was transported to the island of the 7 seas. Then the genie seized the lad and were about to throw him into the bottomless sea when they took pity on him, he being their former master, and left him in a wilderness on the shore. This was a dreadful change for the youth. He traveled a long way and at length came to the hut of a fisherman who accepted him as an apprentice. But let us return to the animals. The dog, the cat, and the mouse, seeing what misfortune had come to their master, decided to venture to the island of the seven seas, and getting the ring from the Jewish man, they took it to their master, whom they knew by instinct to have become the apprentice of a fisherman. They immediately started and soon came to the sea. The dog entered the water, the cat took her seat on his neck, while the mouse rode on the cat's back. The dog began to swim and proved to be an expert at the art. "We hope our weight will not cause you to sink, brother dog," said the cat and the mouse. "Pshaw," said the dog proudly. "You are as light as a feather and speak of sinking me. Nay, be careful not to be blown away from my back by the wind of my respiration." Ooh, yeah, let those bitches have it, dog. This is why we love dogs. Dogs are loyal, baby. And out of his mouth he hung his long tongue. So swimming, at last they came to the island of the seven seas, where they saw their master's palace. It was night. The dog stood at the bottom of the wall, while the cat, with the mouse on her back, climbed up until they came to the window. But as it was closed, it was now the turn of the mouse to do his part. He gnawed the board with his fine teeth and opened a hole large enough for him to go through the window. Entering, he looked everywhere for the ring, but it could not be found. The Jewish man was asleep. "Look at his fingers," whispered the cat from outside. But it was not there. "Look in his mouth," whispered the cat. The mouse made a careful examination, and behold, the ring was in his mouth. But how to get it? The mouse saw that the man had put his snuff box near his bed. He first ran to the cellar and soaked his tail in vinegar, and then came back and thrust his tail into the snuff box. Wait. Am I tripping? Isn't a snuff box like where you put your cocaine? Right? Am I like wrong? Not an anatomical snuff box. Oh, okay. They would often use snuff boxes for tobacco sometimes. Let's do a quick deep dive because now I need to know. But shout out to Matt Berry and Rich Fulcher because I'll give you my love plastic. No, yeah, I'm not looking at the show. Okay, here we go. A snuff box is one of the more functional types of decorative boxes. It would often contain snuff, which is a mixture of ground tobacco and scented oils. Those were popularly used during the 18th century when snuff taking was fashionable. Okay, Peppers, we hear you. Okay, you know what? This is so interesting because I didn't realize that. I've heard the term snuff, but I always thought it meant some kind of like cocaine mixture. I never knew that it was powdered tobacco and scented oils. And that's really interesting to me because from what I understand, in the Americas, the indigenous people in the Americas would originally started with powdered tobacco, which they would inhale through their nose before they started smoking it. And that is often known as either mapacho or rape or hape, depending on pronunciation. This is so interesting. So apparently there would be two kind of snuff boxes. There would be pocket boxes, and then there would be a communal box for table use. And this is so interesting. Snuff boxes were designed to be tightly sealed, so that air would not compromise the quality of the snuff. This is so interesting. Wow. Okay, well that was a really cool little side tangent. Thanks for obliging me, you guys. Okay, so the mouse has gone to the kitchen, gone to the cellar, and soaked his tail in vinegar. He came back into the bedroom, thrust his tail into the snuff box, and he repeated this several times until his tail was well stiffened with a coating of vinegar and snuff. He went then to the sleeping man, and perching upon his beard, thrust his tail into his nostril as far as it could go. Fuck. This caused the man to sneeze with all his might, and behold, the ring was flung from his mouth. The mouse uttered a shriek of joy, and snatching the ring from the floor in a twinkling of an eye, disappeared through the hole. The man immediately arose, and lighting a candle, began to search for the ring. Not finding it, he thought to look for it in the morning, and again went to bed. Bro, I'm sorry, you're not going to bed after you lose your ring that you used to control Jinn. I don't buy it. I literally just this morning was rewatching Fellowship of the Ring. But it's so real. Like, if you have this ring that you're using for power, there's no way you're gonna go back to bed while you don't know where it is. I don't buy that for a minute. Okay. Okay, went back to bed. The mouse and the cat descended the wall to their big-mouthed friend, who was looking at them wistfully. The dog again entered the water, and the cat took her place on his back, and the mouse rested on the cat's back. They decided that the ring should be in the cat's mouth. This time they began to swim toward the opposite shore of the sea, where the lad was serving the fishermen. They crossed the 7 seas and approached the shore safely. As soon as they saw the land and their master's hut, the dog said to his companions, "I am swimming for you, but you have the ring. You will give it to master, who will praise you, while I, who have worked the hardest, will not receive any credit. Not so. You must put the ring in my mouth before we reach the land." Oh, come on. I don't buy this either. I feel like a dog would be like, "Good job, team," you know? But here we go. "Brother dog," said the cat, "now you are tired, and see how you keep your mouth open all the time and stretched your tongue out. If we put the ring in your mouth, we are afraid you will drop it into the sea. But as soon as we reach the land, we will give the ring to you, that you may give it to master." "No," said the dog, "you must give it now, or else I will drop you in the sea." He began to shake them, threatening to drown them. The cat, therefore, was obliged to place the ring in the dog's mouth, but he could not keep his mouth shut a single minute. He opened his mouth, stretched his tongue, and began to pant. And behold, the ring fell into the sea. They came ashore, but all in great excitement. The mouse and the cat began to beat the dog, who thrust his tail between his hind legs as if to acknowledge his fault, but had to defend himself against the sharp paws of the cat and the fine teeth of the mouse. Quarreling and howling and rolling upon the sand, they came to the fisherman's hut. The lad, with his natural kindness to animals, came out to separate the fighters, and behold, they were his old friends. Seeing the lad, all three paid him their respects, but again began to beat one another, this time more severely. The youth, seeing that it was impossible to leave them in this way, provided 3 ropes and bound them separately. He gave them food to drink and tried to calm their anger. On the following day, he drew out a net full of fishes and sat down to prepare them for market. Among them was a large fish. As soon as the lad seized it, there was excitement among the animals. The dog barked, the cat meowed, and the mouse shrieked. All 3 tried to cut their ropes. The lad had hardly cut the fish open when the mouse, having gnawed its rope, ran and plunged into the belly of the fish, and in the twinkling of an eye came out with the magic ring in its mouth, for the fish had swallowed the ring. The mouse jumped upon his master's lap and presented the ring, at sight of which the lad understood why the animals were troubled. He untied them and, kissing the 3, expressed his gratitude for their brave enterprise. Then he turned the jewel, and behold, the 2 genii presented themselves. Okay, these are just my thoughts. In the beginning of the story, his mom was telling him not to hurt animals, no matter what. So I thought he was going to ask a fish to help him, and the fish was going to retrieve it for him because he's friends with all the animals. But I guess fish don't count? I don't get it, but whatever. So the lad said to the genie, I want my palace to be restored to its original place. I would like to be placed inside of it again, and I would like the Jewish man to be thrown into the bottomless sea. Fair enough. He had barely finished his sentence when he found himself and his animal friends back in his palace once more, and near him was his wife. The man was cast into the bottomless sea, where he is sinking everlastingly, but never reaches the bottom. Thus the wicked one was punished, and the virtuous one attained his wishes. May heaven grant that you may be all virtuous and attain your wishes. 3 apples fell from heaven, 1 for me, 1 for the storyteller, and 1 for the man who entertained the company. That was very fun, besides the casual racism. Oh my goodness. The magic ring, baby. Okay, well, now that we're just in the flow, let's hop into story number 2, also called The Magic Ring. Let's have some water, though. I do think it's really interesting, though. Like hearing a lot of fairy tales, you can really hear the influence from the Arabic/Persian empires. You know, this storytelling of these like wish-granting jinn, and these mischievous characters and winning princesses and traveling to distant lands. There's actually elements of this story which reminds me a lot of the original Aladdin story. I'm gonna have to tell that story eventually. That one's a long one, but there's a similar plot arc in the Aladdin story of winning the princess and then having to find her again after the palace had been relocated by a naughty boy. Okay, here we go. The Magic Ring, number 2. This is an English fairy tale. Okay. Once upon a time, there lived an old couple who had one son called Martin. Now, when the old man's time had come, he stretched himself out on his bed and he died. Though all his life he had toiled and moiled, he only left his widow and his son 200 florins, which I guess is a currency. The old woman determined to put by the money for a rainy day. But, alas, The rainy day was close at hand, for their meal was all consumed, and who is prepared to face starvation with 200 florins at their disposal? So the old woman counted out 100 of her florins, and giving them to Martin, told him to go into the town and lay in a store of a meal for a year. So Martin started off for the town. When he reached the meat market, he found the whole place in turmoil and a great noise of angry voices and barking dogs. Come on, Peppers, this would be a perfect time for you to bark. They did it. Mixing in the crowd, he noticed a staghound, which the butchers had caught and tied to a post, which was being flogged in a merciless manner. Overcome with pity, Martin spoke to the butchers. "Friends, why are you beating this poor dog so cruelly?" "We have every right to beat him," they replied. "He has just devoured a newly killed pig." Score. That's a big score for a dog. A whole pig. "Leave off beating him," said Martin, "and sell him to me instead." "If you choose to buy him," answered the butchers. "But for such a treasure, we won't take a penny less than 100 florins. Oh, this is so interesting. This is a similar setup to the other story. Are you getting this? 100, exclaimed Martin. "Well, so be it. If you will not take less..." Ooh, sorry, that was my phone. Let's move it. Okay. He took the money out of his pocket. He handed it over and exchanged it for the dog, whose name was Shurka. When Martin got home, his mother met him with the question, "Well, what have you bought?" "Shurka, the dog," replied Martin, pointing to his new possession. "Oh, what a good boy." Whereupon his mother became very angry and abused him roundly. Not round abuse. He ought to be ashamed of himself, when there was scarcely a handful of a meal in the house, to have spent the money on a useless brute like the dog. On the following day, she sent him back to the town, saying, "Here, take our last 100 florins and buy provisions with them. I have just emptied the last grains of meal out of the chest and baked a bannock, but it won't last over tomorrow." Just as Martin was entering the town, he met a rough-looking peasant who was dragging a cat after him by a string, which was fastened round the poor beast's neck. Wait, this is like literally the same story. This is crazy. "Stop," cried Martin. "Why are you dragging that poor cat?" "I mean to drown him," answered the peasant. "What harm has this poor beast done?" asked Martin. "It has just killed a goose," replied the peasant. "Don't drown him. Sell him to me instead," begged Martin. "Not for 100 florins," answered the peasant. "Surely for 100 florins you'll sell it," said Martin. "See, here is the money." And, so saying, he handed him the 100 florins, which the peasant pocketed, and Martin took possession of the cat, which was called Waska. When he reached his home, his mother greeted him with the question, "Well, what have you brought back?" "I have brought this cat, Waska," answered Martin. "And what else?" asked his mother. "I had no money over to buy anything else with," replied Martin. Yeah, I would honestly be super fucking annoyed. "You useless ne'er-do-well!" exclaimed his mother in a great passion. "Leave the house at once and go and beg your bread among strangers." And, as Martin did not dare to contradict her, he called Shurka and Waska and started off with them to the nearest village in search for work. If there's a mouse next, then I'm really interested to see where this goes. On the way, he met a rich peasant who asked him where he was going. I want to get work as a day laborer, he responded. Come along with me then, but I must tell you, I engage my laborers without wages. If you serve me faithfully for a year, I promise you it shall be for your advantage. So Martin consented, and for 1 year he worked diligently and served his master faithfully, not sparing himself in any way. When the day of reckoning had come, the peasant led him into a barn, and pointing to 2 full sacks, said, "Take whichever of these you choose." Martin examined the contents of the sacks, and seeing that one was full of silver and the other full of sand, he said to himself, "There must be a trick about this. I had better take the sand." And throwing the sack over his shoulders, he started out into the world in search of fresh work. On and on he walked, and at last he reached a great gloomy wood. In the middle of the wood, he came upon a meadow where a fire was burning, and in the midst of the fire, surrounded by flames, was a lovely damsel, more beautiful than anything that Martin had ever seen. And when she saw him, she called to him, "Martin, if you would win happiness, save my life. Extinguish the flames with the sand that you have earned in payment for your faithful service." Truly, thought Martin to himself, it would be more sensible to save a fellow being's life with the sand than to drag it about on one's back, seeing what weight it is. And forthwith he lowered the sack from his shoulders and emptied its contents onto the flames, and instantly the fire was extinguished. But at the same moment, behold, the lovely damsel turned into a serpent, and darting upon him, coiled itself round his neck, and whispered lovingly in his ear, "Don't be afraid of me, Martin. I love you and will go with you through the world. But first, you must follow me boldly into my Father's kingdom, underneath the earth. And when we get there, remember this: he will offer you gold and silver and dazzling gems, but do not touch them. Ask him instead for the ring which he wears on his little finger, for in that ring lies a magic power. You only have to throw it from one hand to the other, and at once 12 young men will appear and will do your bidding, no matter how difficult, in a single night." This is so interesting. This is definitely like the same story. So they started on their way, and after much wandering, they reached a spot where a great rock rose straight up in the middle of the road. Instantly, the serpent uncoiled itself from his neck, and as it touched the damp earth, it resumed the shape of a lovely damsel. Pointing to the rock, she showed him an opening just big enough for a man to wriggle through. Passing into it, they entered a long underground passage, which led out onto a wide field, above which spread a blue sky. In the middle of the field stood a magnificent castle built out of porphyry. I don't know this word. Let's Google it. Porphyry. Okay, porphyry is any of various granites or igneous rock with coarse-grained crystals, such as feldspar or quartz, dispersed in a fine-grained silicate-rich, generally aphantic matrix or ground mass. Oh, wow. Fancy, fancy, fancy. Interestingly, it's also the name of a Greek philosopher, a Neoplatonic philosopher born in Tyre, the Roman Phoenicia. Oh, very interesting. Let's learn more. So interestingly, I've totally seen this rock. Okay, it almost looks like carnelian. It's like red, but it has a bunch of sparkles in it. It's like a red sparkly rock. So the term comes from ancient Greek and it means purple. And purple was the color of royalty. And for this reason, because it was associated with royalty, it was given a very aristocratic status. Interestingly, I don't consider it purple. I guess when it's unpolished, it kind of looks purple, but it's more of like a dark rust. And then when you polish it, it's a true rust color. It can also appear as a green rock, a black rock, or even a gray rock. Oh, this is so interesting. Okay, anyway, thank you for obliging me on our deep dive. So this is where they are going underground. Okay, they pass through this rock, they enter a long underground passage which led to a wide field, above which spread a blue sky. In the middle of the field stood a magnificent castle built out of porphyry, with a roof of gold and with glittering battlements. And his beautiful guide told him that this was the palace in which her father lived and reigned over his kingdom in the underworld. Together they entered the palace and were received by the king with great kindness. Turning to his daughter, he said, "My child, I had almost given up the hope of ever seeing you again. Where have you been all of these years?" "My father," she replied, "I owe my life to this youth who saved me from a terrible death." Upon which the king turned to Martin with a gracious smile, saying, "I will reward your courage by granting you whatever your heart desires. Take as much gold, silver, and precious stones as you choose." "I thank you, mighty king, for your gracious offer," answered Martin, "but I do not covet either gold, silver, or precious stones. Yet, if you will grant me a favor, give me, I beg you, the ring from off the little finger of your royal hand. Every time my eye falls onto it, I shall think of your gracious majesty, and when I marry, I shall present it to my bride." So the king took the ring from his finger and gave it to Martin, saying, "Take it, good youth, but with it I make one condition. You are never to confide to anyone that this is a magic ring. If you do, you will straightway bring misfortune on yourself." Martin took the ring, and having thanked the king, he set out on the same road by which he had come down into the underworld. When he had regained the upper air, he started for his old home, and having found his mother still living in the old house where he had left her, they settled down together very happily. So uneventful was their life that it almost seemed as if it would go on this way forever, without let or hindrance. But one day it suddenly came into his mind that he would like to get married, and moreover, that he would choose a very grand wife, the king's daughter, in short. But as he did not trust himself as a wooer, he determined to send his old mother on the mission. Bro, you're gonna send your old mom to the underworld by herself? You're tripping, bro. I literally just can't relate. I also just feel like I had a completely different family dynamic, so I don't call upon my mom to help with anything. But like, bro, your mom's hella fucking old and you're gonna send her to the underworld to score your shorty? Like, that's wild. That's wild. I can't relate. I genuinely can't relate. Okay, so Martin tells his mother, "Mom, you must go to the king and demand the hand of his lovely daughter in marriage." Like, it's not just the king. This is the king of the underworld, bro. This is, you know what this is reminding me of, though? That story, The Little Green Girl of St. Martin. And this guy's name is Martin, remember? This is kind of crazy because they talk about the underworld there and how there was like buildings and plants, and it was like a whole world under there, under the earth. This is an interesting parallel here. I'm very fascinated. Okay, so his mother replies, "What are you thinking of, my son?" Aghast at the idea. "Why cannot you marry someone in your own rank? That would be far more fitting than to send a poor old woman like me a wooing to the king's court for the hand of a princess. Why, it is as much as our heads are worth. Neither my life nor yours would be worth anything if I went on such a fool's errand." "Never fear, little mother," answered Martin. "Trust me, all will be well. But see that you do not come back without an answer of some kind." And so, obedient to her son's behest, the old woman hobbled off to the palace and, without being hindered, reached the courtyard and began to mount the flight of steps leading to the royal presence chamber. At the head of the landing, rows of courtiers were collected in magnificent attire, who stared at the queer old figure and called to her and explained to her with every kind of sign that it was strictly forbidden to mount the steps of the palace. But their stern words and forbidding gestures made no impression whatever on the old woman, and she resolutely continued to climb the stairs, bent on carrying out her son's orders. Upon this, some of the courtiers seized her by the arms and held her back by sheer force, at which she set up such a yell that the king himself heard it and stepped out onto the balcony to see what was the matter. When he beheld the old woman flinging her arms wildly about, he heard her scream that she would not leave the place until she had laid her case before the king. He ordered that she should be brought into his presence, and forthwith she was conducted into the golden presence chamber, where, leaning back amongst the cushions of royal purple, the king sat, surrounded by his counselors and courtiers. Curtsying, the old woman stood silent before the king. "Well, my good old dame, what can I do for you?" asked the king. "I have come," replied Martin's mother, "and your majesty must not be angry with me. I have come a-wooing." That's so cute. "Is the woman out of her mind?" said the king with an angry frown. But Martin's mother answered boldly, "If the king will only listen patiently to me and give me a straightforward answer, he will see that I am not out of my mind. You, O king, have a lovely daughter to give in marriage. I have a son, a wooer, as clever a youth, as good a son-in-law as you will find in your whole kingdom. There is nothing that he cannot do. Now tell me, O king, plump and plain, will you give your daughter to my son as wife?" The king listened to the end of the old woman's strange request, but every moment his face grew blacker and his features sterner, till all at once he thought to himself, "Is it worthwhile that I, the king, should be angry with this poor old fool?" And all the courtiers and counselors were amazed when they saw the hard lines round his mouth and the frown on his brow grow smooth, and heard the mild but mocking tones in which he answered the old woman. He replied, "If your son is as wonderfully clever as you say, and if there is nothing in the world that he cannot do, let him build a magnificent castle just opposite my palace windows in 24 hours. The palace must be joined together by a bridge of pure crystal, one On each side of the bridge there must be growing trees, having golden and silver apples, with birds of paradise among the branches. At the right of the bridge there must be a church with 5 golden cupolas. Cupolas? I'm just learning so many new words. Cupola. What is that? No. Creo que en inglés, por favor. Inglés. Oh, okay. A cupola, or oh, I didn't know that. It's the dome-shaped structure. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that he's saying that it has to be a church with like 5 domes on it, if that makes sense. Okay, there must be a church with 5 golden cupolas. In this church, your son shall be wedded to my daughter, and we will keep the wedding festivities in the new castle. But if he fails to execute this my royal command, then, just as a mild monarch, I shall give orders that you and he are taken, and first dipped in tar, and then in feathers, and you shall be executed in the marketplace for entertainment of my courtiers. Okay, this is fascinating, because obviously there are like huge similarities in this story to the other magic ring from Armenia. But what I find interesting is that this story has some details that are more similar to the Aladdin tale. And the Aladdin story is much longer, but there is a portion when he has his magical lamp and he wants to marry the princess. And so the king gives him a very similar demand, that he has to build this giant castle in overnight, and he has to build it across from the pre-existing castle with rubies and diamonds and all these like crazy, unimaginable, it would be impossible to do overnight. So anyway, I find this really interesting, how similar these 2 magic ring stories are, but also the overlap with the original Aladdin story. Okay, after his request, a smile played round the king's lips as he finished speaking, and his courtiers and counselors shook with laughter when they thought of the old woman's folly, and they praised the king's wise device. And they said to each other, "What a joke it will be when we see the pair of them tarred and feathered. The son is just as able to grow a beard on the palm of his hand as to execute such a task in 24 hours. See, this is how I know that humans need help. Like, these are... the people of the court are, like, excited to see people fail and get tarred and feathered. Jesus, this is fucked up. This is why we need therapy, you guys. Like, not to go on my other, like, self-help tangent, but I really feel like we need to show compassion to each other, because all of us, no matter what part of the world, have descended from ancestors that either, like, lived such gruesome lives at one point, or were gruesome people and did gruesome things to others, right? And, like, we've inherited this trauma. Imagine being someone that is like cool with people being tarred and feathered and laughs at it. Like, you're traumatized, right? And like, what kind of kids are you raising? Probably kids that also think it's funny when people are tarred and feathered. It reminds me a lot of the short story, The Lottery, which everyone should read. It's fantastic. It's written by Flannery O'Connor, who is my queen, a woman ahead of her time. I'm obsessed with Flannery O'Connor. She's incredible. She also wrote that story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. She wrote short stories that are so like cinematic and devastating, and yet like a 15-minute read. It's incredible. But in The Lottery, if you're not familiar with it, I think The Crucible is based off of it. Am I wrong? I don't remember. Maybe not. I have never seen The Crucible, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Whatever. The Lottery is kind of like a dystopian story based in the past. I think it's kind of set in like a Massachusetts Puritan style town, but there's not really a lot of world building. In a nutshell, the story is about a small community, and every year they have a lottery. So the story starts on a morning, and there's a particular family who's the main character, and I forget the last name, so let's just call them the Jones. But the Jones, I think they have like 3 or 4 kids, and there's a husband and a wife, and they wake up excited about the lottery. Yay, the lottery. Everyone loves the lottery. And, they go to the town square, and all the wives are talking, all the fathers are talking, all the kids are playing, and everyone is just like gossiping. Who do you think is going to take the lottery this year? Everyone's excited. And so all the men go, I think they draw straws, right? And it turns out that Mr. Jones pulls the shortest straw, or whatever. He gets the lottery pick. And that's when the Jones go from being excited to a little nervous. So then within the Jones family, they have to draw straws again. And of course, the mother pulls the shortest straw, and then the town starts throwing rocks at her, and they murder her. And so the end of this story is literally Mrs. Jones being like, please, maybe we should rethink this. Maybe the lottery is fucked up. And even her child, who's like a 3-year-old boy, is like, come on, Mom, don't be a bad sport. And they murder her for fun. I love that story because I feel like it's such a good window into the human psyche, which is like, once something becomes a tradition, people are fine with it until it negatively affects them. But because that's where their empathy ends, no one else, not even her own children, feel any remorse killing their own mother by stoning her to death. Because it's this celebrated day. It's a twisted story. Really good one. Really, really, really good. Okay. So that was my tangent based off the tarring and feathering. Okay. So now the poor old woman was mortally afraid, and in a trembling voice she asked, "Is that really your royal will, O king? Must I take this order to my poor son?" "Yes, old dame, such is my command. If your son carries out my order, he shall be rewarded with my daughter. But if he fails, away to the tar barrel and the stake with you both." What? And now you're going to burn them at the stake? Oh, you're just upping the ante now. On her way home, the poor old woman shed bitter tears. And when she saw Martin, she told him what the king had said. And she sobbed aloud. "Didn't I tell you, my son, that you should marry someone of your own rank? It would have been better for us this day if you had. As I told you, my going to court has been as much as our lives are worth. And now we will both be tarred and feathered and burnt in the public marketplace." Fuck. "This is terrible," she moaned and cried. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty fucked up. Tarred and feathered and burnt at the stake. That's fucked up, dude. Meanwhile, everyone's like, right on, can't wait. Jesus. "Never fear, little mother," answered Martin. "Trust me, and you will see, and all will be well. You may go to sleep with a quiet mind." And stepping out in front of the hut, Martin threw his ring from one palm of the hand to the other, upon which 12 youths instantly appeared, and demanded what he wanted them to do. Then he told them the king's commands, and they answered that by next morning all shall be accomplished exactly as the king had ordered. The next morning, when the king awoke and looked out of his window, to his amazement he beheld a magnificent castle just opposite his own palace, and joined to it a bridge of pure crystal, At each side of the bridge, trees were growing, from whose branches hung golden and silver apples, among which birds of paradise perched. At the right, gleaming in the sun, were 5 golden cupolas of a splendid church, whose bells rang out as if they would summon people from all corners of the earth to come and behold the wonder. Now, though the king would much rather have seen his future son-in-law tarred, feathered, and burnt at the stake, he remembered his royal oath and had to make the best of a bad business. Yeah, what a bummer that now you get a second castle with golden apples and silver apples and birds. Like, too bad you can't tar, feather, and burn alive 2 peasants. Oh my God. This is why we need help, you guys. This is fucked. So the king took a heart of grace and made Martin a duke and gave his daughter a rich dowry and prepared the grandest wedding feast that had ever been seen, so that to this day the old people in the country still talk of it. After the wedding, Martin and his royal bride went to dwell in the magnificent new palace, and here Martin lived in the greatest comfort and luxury, such luxury as he had never imagined. But though he was happy as the day was long, and as merry as a grig... Wait, I need to know what a grig is. What is a grig? What is a grig? Grig? What is grig? A grig is either a small eel or a grasshopper or cricket. Let's check in with the phrase once again. Merry as a grig. We need to learn where this comes from. I want to learn where this phrase comes from. I'm merry as a grig. Merry as a grig. Merry as a grig. Okay, yeah, so what they mean as happy as a lark, merry as a cricket. Shut up! Can we say that more? I'm merry as a grig, happy as a lark, and merry as a cricket. I love this. I love how like the culture of England at this time is like so dark and like brutal, and people are enjoying to watch other people being tortured and burned alive, and yet they say stuff like merry as a grig. Like, there's certain things that you can tell has a woman's touch, you know, and I feel like an old grandma came up with merry as a grig, and someone's hateful ass father came up with feathering and tarring people and burning them alive. Probably an incel, actually. Okay, anyway, that's just me pontificating. Okay, so our boy is merry as a grig. Meanwhile, the king's daughter fretted all day, thinking of the indignity that had been done to her in making her marry Martin, the poor widow's son, instead of a rich young prince from a foreign country. So unhappy was she that she spent all her time wondering how she should get rid of her undesirable husband. At first, she determined to learn the secret of his power, and with flattering, caressing words, she tried to coax him to tell her how he was so clever that there was nothing in the world that he could not do. This is so weird. Like, don't you remember him? He saved you, and he got the ring from your dad. Like, what? I'm so confused, but okay, whatever. They're doing this whole song and dance. She's asking to figure out how he can do this. He says, at first he tells her nothing, but once when he was in a yielding mood, she approached him with a winning smile on her lovely face, and, speaking flattering words to him, she gave him a potion to drink with a sweet, strong taste. And when he had drunk it, Martin's lips were unsealed, and he told her that all his power lay in the magic ring that he wore on his finger. and he described to her how to use it. And, still speaking, he fell into a deep sleep. And when she saw that the potion had worked and that he was sound asleep, the princess took the magic ring from his finger, and, going into the courtyard, she threw it from one of her palms to the other. On the instant, the 12 youths appeared and asked her what she commanded them to do. She then told him that by the next morning they were to do away with the castle and the bridge and the church, and put in their stead the humble hut in which Martin used to live with his mother, and that while he slept, her husband was to be carried to his old lowly room, and that they were to bear her away to the utmost ends of the earth, where an old king lived, who would make her welcome in his palace and surround her with the state that befitted a royal princess. Wow, triflin'. You shall be obeyed, answered the 12 youths at the same moment. And lo and behold, the following morning, when the king awoke and took out of his window, he beheld to his amazement that the palace, bridge, church, and trees had all vanished, and there was nothing in their place but a bare, miserable-looking hut. Immediately the king sent for his son-in-law and commanded him to explain what had happened. But Martin looked at his royal father-in-law and answered never a word. Then the king was very angry, and calling a council together, he charged Martin with having been guilty of witchcraft, and of having deceived the king, and having made away with the princess. Oh, okay, got it. I misunderstood this whole time. He is wooing the regular king, not the king of the underworld, which is why the princess didn't realize. Okay, this is, as a storyteller, I'm reading this story. I think that whoever documented this did not do a very good job being specific that Martin obtained the ring from the king of the underworld after saving the princess of the underworld. Meanwhile, he sent his mom to woo the princess of the regular king. Okay, got it. Maybe you guys all got that. I did not get that, but I get it now. Okay. So the king decides that Martin is guilty of witchcraft, and having deceived the king and having made away with the princess, he was condemned to imprisonment in a high stone tower with neither meat nor drink till he should die of starvation. Then, in the hour of his dire necessity, his old friends Shurka the dog and Waska the cat remembered how Martin had once saved them from a cruel death, and they took counsel together as to how they should help him. And Shurka growled and was of opinion that he would like to tear everyone in pieces. But Waska the cat purred meditatively and scratched the back of her ear with a velvet paw and remained lost in thought. We love her. We love a cat that's so hot. At the end of a few minutes, she had made up her mind, and turning to Shurka, said, "Let us go together into the town, and the moment we meet a baker, you must make a rush between his legs and upset the tray from off his head. I will lay hold of the rolls and will carry them off to our master." No sooner said than done. Together the two faithful creatures trotted off into the town, and very soon they met a baker bearing a tray on his head, and looking round on all sides, where he cried, "Fresh rolls, sweet cake, fancy bread of every kind. Come and buy, come and take, sure you'll find it to your mind. Here comes the bake man." I tried to make that work. I guess it doesn't work as well as the fruit man. At this moment, Shurka made a rush between the baker's legs. The baker stumbled and the tray was upset. The rolls fell to the ground, and while the man angrily pursued Shurka, Waska managed to drag the rolls out of his sight behind a bush. And when, a moment later, Shurka joined her, they set off at full tilt to the stone tower where Martin was a prisoner, taking the rolls with them. Waska, being very agile, climbed up by the outside to the grated window and called in an anxious voice, "Are you alive, master?" "Scarcely alive. I'm almost starved to death," answered Martin in a weak voice. "I little thought it would come to this, that I should die of hunger." "Never fear, dear master. Shurka and I will look after you," said Waska. And in another moment she climbed down and brought him back a roll, and then another and another, till she had brought him the whole tray load. Upon which she said, "Dear master, Shurka and I are going off to a distant kingdom at the utmost ends of the earth to fetch you back your magic ring. You must be careful that the rolls last till our return." And Waska took leave of her beloved master and set off with Shurka on their journey. On and on they traveled, looking always to right and left for traces of the princess, following up every track, making inquiries of every cat and dog they met, listening to the talk of every wayfarer they passed. And at last they heard that the kingdom at the utmost ends of the earth, where the 12 young youths had borne the princess, was not very far off. And at last one day they reached that distant kingdom, and going at once to the palace, they began to make friends with all the dogs and cats in the place, and to question them about the princess and the magic ring. But no one could tell them much about either. Now, one day it chanced that Waska had gone down to the palace cellar to hunt for mice and rats, and seeing an especially fat, well-fed mouse, she pounced upon it, buried her claws in its soft fur, and was just going to gobble it up when she stopped by the pleading tones of the little creature. It pleaded, "If you will only spare my life, I may be of great service to you. I will do everything in my power for you, for I am the king of mice, and if I perish, the whole race will die out." You might carry the bubonic plague though, bro, but that's a whole other alternate universe concept. Wouldn't that be a gag if the cat was like, "No, in the future your kind will cause the bubonic plague, so I shall kill you." "Okay, so be it," said Waska. "I will spare your life, but in return you must do something for me. In this castle there lives a princess, the wicked wife of my dear master. She has stolen away his magic ring. You must get it away from her at whatever cost. Do you hear me? Till you have done this, I won't take my claws out of your fur." "Good," replied the mouse. "I will do what you ask." And so saying, he summoned all the mice in his kingdom together. A countless number of mice, small and big, brown and gray, assembled and formed a circle round their king, who was a prisoner under Waska's claws. Turning to them, he said, "Dear and faithful subjects, whoever among you will steal the magic ring from the strange princess will release me from a cruel death. I shall honor him above all other mice in the kingdom." Instantly, a tiny mouse stepped forward and said, "I often creep about the princess's bedroom at night, and I have noticed that she has a ring which she treasures as the apple of her eye. All day she wears it on her finger, and at night she keeps it in her mouth. I will undertake, sire, to steal away the ring for you." And the tiny mouse tripped away into the bedroom of the princess and waited for nightfall. Then, when the princess had fallen asleep, it crept up onto her bed and gnawed a hole in the pillow. through which it dragged one by one little down feathers and threw them under the princess's nose. And the fluff flew into the princess's nose and into her mouth, and starting up, she sneezed and coughed, and the ring fell out of her mouth onto the coverlet. In a flash, the tiny mouse had seized it and brought it to Waska as a ransom for the king of mice. Thereupon, Waska and Shurka started off and traveled night and day till they reached the stone tower where Martin was imprisoned. And the cat climbed up the window and called out to him, "Martin, dear master, are you still alive?" "Ah, Waska, my faithful little cat, is that you?" replied a weak voice. "I am dying of hunger. For 3 days I have not tasted food." "Be of good heart, dear master," replied Waska. "From this day forth you will know nothing but happiness and prosperity. If this were a moment to trouble you with riddles, I would make you guess what Shurka and I have brought you back. Only think. We have got you your ring. Boom, baby!" At these words, Martin's joy knew no bounds. He stroked her fondly, and she rubbed up against him and purred happily, while below Shurka bounded in the air and barked joyfully. Then Martin took the ring and threw it from one hand into the other, and instantly the 12 youths appeared and asked what they were to do. "Fetch me first something to eat and drink as quickly as possible, and after that bring musicians hither, and let us have music all day long." Now, when the people of the town and palace heard music coming from the tower, they were filled with amazement, and came to the king with the news that witchcraft must be going on in Martin's tower, for instead of dying of starvation, he was seemingly making merry to the sound of music, and to the chatter of plates and glass, and knives and forks. And the music was so enchantingly sweet that all the passer-bys stood listen. On this the king sent at once a messenger to the starvation tower. The starvation tower, oh my God. And he was so astonished with what he saw that he remained rooted to the last moment. Then the king sent his chief counselor, and they too were transfixed with wonder. At last the king came himself, and likewise he was spellbound by the beauty of the music. Then Martin summoned the 12 youths. He spoke to them, saying, "Build up my castle again, and join it to the king's palace with a crystal bridge. Do not forget the trees with the golden and silver apples and the birds of paradise on its branches. Put back the church with 5 cupolas, and let the bells ring out, summoning the people from the 4 corners of the kingdom. And one thing more, bring back my faithless wife and lead her into the woman's chamber." And it was all done as he commanded. And, leaving the starvation tower, he took the king, his father-in-law, by the arm, and led him into the new palace, where the princess sat in fear, trembling, awaiting her death. And Martin spoke to the king. He said, "King and royal father, I have suffered much at the hands of your daughter. What punishment shall be dealt to her?" Then the mild king answered, "Beloved prince and son-in-law, if you love me, let your anger be turned to grace. Forgive my daughter and restore her to your heart and favor." And Martin's heart was softened, and he forgave his wife, and they lived happily ever after. And his old mother came and lived with him, and he never parted with Shurka and Waska. And I need hardly tell you that he never again let the ring out of his possession. And that is the story of the magic ring. I mean, I feel like the moral of the story is that princes and princesses are so tired. Like, not a good choice. They're entitled. They're going to stab you in the back. And dogs and cats are the best. Surround yourself with dogs and cats. That's my moral of the story. I also feel like I would have married the princess of the underworld. She was way cooler. She's the one who scored you the ring in the first place. Am I right? I just feel like this guy has it all twisted. Martin, whatever. I do find it so interesting, the similarities between these stories. It's very clear that these stories came from somewhere and then traveled throughout Europe and the Caucasus Mountains, and who knows where the story came from, but you can hear how it traveled and changed from the regions. I find that really interesting. I loved that. Well, I hope that you are having a beautiful day, my dear friend. Please drink water. Please be kind to yourself. We need more human beings on this earth who are kind and compassionate. We don't need to be tarring and feathering each other. It's not the dark ages anymore, bro. War is so last millennium. Let's fucking change it up. Let's eat snacks in the sun, topless. Let's swim in the river and talk to the birds. Let's listen to the song of the wind. And let our hair hang long, or I guess in my case, shave your head. Do whatever, dude, but just take care of yourself and be a kind pepper. I'm proud of you. If you have a story you want me to tell, please email in. If you grew up hearing folk tales, email in. If you would like to buy a t-shirt, buy a t-shirt. We have merch. The information is in the show notes. I send you so much love. Abrazos y besitos. Hasta luego, mis amores.